everybody, and welcome to So Says Shernoff. It is great to have you here. I am Josh Shernoff, and we have got a good one for you today. Former WWE official Kevin Keenan is here.
Yeah!
Plus an interview with the man I helped give a face, Jerry Lynn. But first, it has been a busy month in the wrestling business, so let's take a look at headlines. Okay, so if you are a die-hard WWE apologist and you think that everything they do is great, no matter how mind-numbingly nonsensical it is, then this episode may not be for you. And I know what you're thinking. Well, here we go. Josh is going to bury the WWE again while he puckers up to the buttocks that is AEW. Well, let me just say this. You are right. But if you think that it's just because I was the host of Fight TV's Fight and Focus Live for the first ever AEW broadcast on TNT, and if you think that it's just because I have been welcomed into the AEW locker room for every major event they have ever put on to date, if you think that because of those reasons I'm going to go easy on them, well, you'd be mistaken. So what if they are an establishment of visionaries who can do no wrong? Who cares if I love AEW and all the people involved in that company that I hope to one day call my home? And yes, maybe I have looked into see if squatters' rights applies to attending multiple wrestling shows. Maybe I have been told that that's not how the law works. But nevertheless, I still have journalistic integrity. So here you go. A Philly street fight shouldn't have referee-enforced rope breaks. There, are you happy? I have bashed AEW. Although, to be fair, they never really specified the full rules of a Philly street fight, so technically, rope breaks may have been part of the rules. I don't know. They're wonderful. Leave me alone. Anyway, here's what's been going on in the kingdom of WWE. For starters, this guy's king. The runner-up is now called Shorty because he's 5'8", which so am I, so, you. And they're bringing in, quote, outside sports athletes, one to compete for the world championship, the other to unsuccessfully attempt to break a pen. Oh, and both of those athletes will be competing in Saudi Arabia. So it's been a good month. Some highlights of one of the most spectacular months in the history of the WWE would include the draft. Which part of it? Well, let's take our pick, shall we? Is it the part where Jinder Mahal is drafted before Rey Mysterio? Maybe it's the part where a room full of people pantomime celebration over draft picks that nobody should be celebrating. An example would be that time Raw wasted 2 draft picks on Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross because I guess they forgot that they were a tag team like a week before, only to be traded days later as a tag team. But no, the biggest highlight of the draft would have to be when WWE.com posted the list of superstars in order of how they would be drafted before the draft even started. To say the draft was a letdown would be as obvious as saying Eric Bischoff didn't really get a chance to make much of an impact. Actually, I'm sorry, I'm not sure you're allowed to say Eric Bischoff and impact in the same sentence, legal thing. But before the world stopped watching, there was something the universe couldn't stop talking about. Hell in a Cell. The main event saw Seth Rollins defend his Universal title against The Fiend. In the end, The Fiend won by disqualification in Hell in a Cell, which was effectively a no disqualification match. And I know WWE claimed the referee stopped it for Bray Wyatt's well-being, much like that time they stopped Mankind and The Undertaker's Hell in a Cell match. But still, it was a confusing end to the match that left fans chanting AEW. So this was a mistake from the start. They want Seth to stay champion and don't want The Fiend to lose. Here's an idea. Don't book the match. But you know what? Everyone makes mistakes, and it's easy for me to say in hindsight that they never should have had that match. So lesson learned, it will never happen again. Until October 31st, when they have a rematch at Crown Jewel. A Falls Count Anywhere match that I guess will end in a count out. Maybe they figured this was a safe crowd to do this in front of. I mean, no matter how bad the finish is, it really isn't any worse than the event itself. Finally, on headlines, ratings. The wrestling world is once again obsessed with ratings. And when I say the wrestling world, I don't just mean the fans. Rumor is that Eric Bischoff's abrupt exit from WWE was in response to SmackDown's million viewer loss in a week. Now, I don't know if that's true or if that's the whole story, but since this show is technically wrestling news, I'll take my cue from the greats and just report it as fact. SmackDown's move to Fox did not introduce a new boom period in WWE the way some may have hoped it would. Why? Well, in my opinion, just because you show bad entertainment to more people doesn't mean the bad entertainment will become good. You have to actually produce good entertainment. You know who is producing good entertainment? NXT and AEW. The two brands effectively make up what is referred to as the Wednesday Night War. As of this taping, AEW has defeated NXT in the ratings every single week since its start. So, not really much of a war yet. However, to be fair, AEW has had much greater fanfare and commercial exposure than NXT, so it is understandable. Also, a lot of people decided that as soon as NXT moved to USA, it would become watered down, so they never even gave it a chance. My advice? Give it a chance. Give it all a chance. See, here's the thing that I can't stand. There are these people on the internet who claim to love wrestling, yet have decided to swear off specific brands and talent without even watching them. There is wrestling I love and wrestling I don't love. But if I haven't seen it, my opinion is I haven't seen it. I joked in the beginning about how pro AEW I am, and as a fan, I really am. Have their shows been flawless? No. But find me one episode of professional wrestling ever that was flawless. Like it or not, you can see AEW trying. Same with Ring of Honor, Impact, MLW, NWA, and so many others. I am hard on WWE for sure, but A, I'm only giving my opinion, which I am entitled to, and B, I'm hard on them because they should be doing better. They are not putting on an entertaining show, to me. And I know that for a fact because I'm not being entertained. And apparently, I'm not alone. If WWE entertains you, that's great. If AEW doesn't entertain you, that's also just as okay. What isn't okay is to not watch and complain, or worse than that, watch, complain, swear you will never watch again, and watch again and complain. My job is to commentate on pro wrestling. I have to watch. You don't. There is enough quality and different pro wrestling from the one you dislike that you can go watch something else. Lord knows a million people did just that. Be like those million people. Stop watching. Bitching on Twitter will not change a thing. Ratings will. And that's headlines. We'll be right back.
You believe you see all there is to see in the world. You believe there's nothing hiding in the shadows. But I have seen the truth. And it's more wonderful and more terrifying than you could ever imagine.
Show. When AEW came to Philly, I had the opportunity to catch up with my good pal, Jerry Lynn. Take a look. All right, I am here now with my very special guest. We are backstage at the Liacouras Center. AEW Dynamite is just a couple hours away, and I am joined by a trainer here at AEW. And you know that if you go to the website, you can see his face. Coach, yes, a coach. A producer even, if you will, but an all-around great guy and legendary wrestling champion, Mr. Jerry Lynn. Thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for being here.
And thank you for getting a picture up of me finally.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because there was no way. I was going to wait a little bit to bring that up, but we might as well get into that. Yes, I mean, I'm not one to take full 100% responsibility for you having a picture on the AEW website. But if you wanted to give me that credit, I'm also not one to...
I didn't even know. I didn't know I didn't have one up there.
So thanks to So Says Shernoff on Fight TV, that's how you found out that you didn't have a picture on there.
Right, yeah, that's how.
But now you have a picture on there, and it's a great picture, and you should all go to AEW.com and check out Jerry's picture.
I didn't know there was such a thing as a great picture of me.
Well, you know what? Maybe there was a lot of editing. What have you found to be most challenging since starting your job here at AEW?
Challenging? Well, it's always challenging, and you're always learning new stuff all the time. But I guess the hard part is, I've done the agenting before in the past and stuff, but it wasn't live TV, and live's different when you're just taping it, and then you can, if you have to, have post editing to fix things you need to. But there's no fixing here. It's just everything's live, so that's kind of challenging too.
Yeah, everything I do, I make sure I can post edit. Like this right there. I'll just cut that right out and we'll move on. But
yeah, it'd be better for it.
Thank you. So, all right, one of the things I wanted to ask you about, we're here in Philadelphia. I mentioned the Liacouras Center. Philadelphia and ECW. You can't think professional wrestling in Philadelphia without thinking ECW. You, a former champion. What is it like to be back here in Philadelphia? You obviously have so many memories of this place. What's it like to be back here with this new venture with AEW?
Every time I'm in Philly now, it's a weird deja vu, home away from home type feeling, because, I grew up in Minneapolis and I never knew where my wrestling career would take me or anything, and I didn't think I would be wrestling in Philly as many times as I've wrestled here, because I've probably been here. I couldn't even tell you how many times I've been to Philly. But so it's always just a weird feeling when you've been to a different city that many times. Like even Chicago, I couldn't tell you how many times I've been to Chicago or New York but it's just a weird home away from home type feeling. And I was glad yesterday I ran into Bill Apter at the hotel, and he told me about this Reading Terminal Market. It was amazing.
Yes.
All the times I've been to Philly, I'd never been there.
Really?
So I went there yesterday and had lunch, and then this morning I got up and I wanted to go there again and had breakfast there today. So it was awesome.
Yeah, it's a cool place here in Philly. We're quite proud of our city. You have, speaking of Philadelphia, somebody who lives in Philadelphia and is in the ECW alum, your podcast partner, Mikey Whipwreck. Can you tell us a little bit about Front Row Material, how that came to be, what people can, if anyone hasn't heard it, what they can expect from that?
Well, I did an interview one time for Mike Freeland, who's our co-host, and he tries to keep us all in order and organized, which is probably impossible with me and Mikey. But after the interview, he said, "Do you ever think about writing a book?" And I said, that'll probably never happen, because I don't remember a lot of my career, and I'd need a couple dozen people to help me remember things. And he says, "Well, how about a podcast? You ever think about doing an ECW podcast?" And I said, "Well, no." He says, "Is there anyone in ECW you still keep in touch with that would want to do it with you?" And I said, "Well, the one person I keep in touch with the most is Mikey." And he said, "Why don't you ask him?" So I asked Mikey, and he said, "Sure." And Mikey said, "But I don't want it to be serious." He says, "I want it to be like, what's his name? The big DJ from New York who's on Excess or Sirius."
Stern?
Yeah, Howard Stern.
Oh, okay,
I'm
yeah,
sorry. A lot of concussions.
That's fine.
No,
That's
so he
right.
says, "I want it to be like Howard Stern."
Okay.
And he says, "Minus the sex and fart jokes." I said, "Well, we'll probably still have fart jokes."
You gotta have fart jokes.
Yeah.
What are you doing? Come on.
So, and we both agreed we didn't want it to be serious and sit there and watch everyone else wrestle and psychoanalyze their stuff, and we just wanted to have fun with it. So, half of it's talking about our personal family lives and stuff, and the stuff we go through at home, and half of it's, we'll talk about ECW memories, and that's how it all started.
Now, Mikey's kind of been known on the podcast for some of his impressions and stuff. Is that something that you knew about from the locker? Okay, I assume that was something that he hadn't been holding in for 20-something years.
No, I knew, and that's why Mikey and I hit it. We got along great right from the get-go on the road, because a lot of times, like Paulie would always wait till everyone got done doing their promos on the last night, to get your paychecks. So he made sure everyone stuck around.
Right. Okay.
And no one would slide out without doing a promo. But some of them nights, it'd last till 4:30 in the morning till everyone got done. So, of course, we'd start getting tired and more delirious and acting crazy to entertain ourselves. And so Mikey always would be busting out impressions, and he's got so many. It's crazy.
What's your favorite of his?
All of them.
All of them, all right.
All of them. I mean, his Terry Funk, Cactus Jack, who else? Bobby Heenan, Andre the Giant, Paul Stanley from KISS. He does a great impression. I mean, there's so many. Wilford Brimley. There's so many he does.
About
it's
that
crazy.
diabetes. So one of the things we talked about in the beginning, the photograph or lack thereof, the AEW website, which is there's a peanut gallery over there talking to us. I want their permission. I don't want to get beat up. I want their permission before I turn the camera. Oh, he's gone. He's gone. It was Dean Malenko and Tony Schiavone.
We ran him off real fast.
Gone. They didn't want to mess with me. So we talked about your picture. But one thing that AEW has done to really honor you in a way was just kind of announced recently. The side plate on the new tag team titles is not just any pile driver happening, but that is a Patton and Jerry Lynn cradle pile driver. Tell me a little bit about that.
I was shocked. Someone had mentioned it on Twitter or something. And so I looked at it and I thought, I just put and I figured someone photoshopped this, or whatever. And then one of the Bucks mentioned something about saying, yeah, we did that as a tribute to Jerry or whatever. And I was just floored. Yeah. I was speechless. I showed Pam, my wife. I said, look what they did for me.
That's
incredible. It was crazy. I know.
Yeah.
And so when I came to the building last week for TV, I went up and thanked them for it and stuff. And they said, no, it's something we really wanted to do. And I was just honored, and it was amazing.
Well, it's pretty great. And every time that you see a tag team champion out there, not only representing AEW, but they're in a way representing your body of work, which is really a cool thing and very much deserving. And I thank you very much for taking the time. This guy is very busy back here, okay? I pulled him away from far more important things than doing this interview with me to do this. So, Jerry, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you for all the support that you've had for our show, and I wish you nothing but the best.
And thank you for the picture.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks, Jerry, for taking the time out of your busy schedule. When we return, former WWE official Kevin Keenan is here. We'll be right back.
You believe you see all there is to see in the world. You believe there's nothing hiding in the shadows. But I have seen the truth. And it's more wonderful and more terrifying than you could ever imagine.
Welcome back to the show. My guest tonight is a former WWE referee and can now be found as the co-host of the Smarks and Stripes podcast. Please welcome Kevin Keenan.
What's up, guys?
Nice to see you. Thanks for being here. Have a seat. Have a seat. You and I go back a long way.
Quite a ways, man.
It's about 18 years.
2001.
2001? Yeah. It's crazy.
Time flies.
Before we get into what you're doing today, I want to kind of take everybody down. You have such a cool story about how you made it in the wrestling business, and I consider that you made it in the wrestling business. Let's talk first about how we met. So I'll tell you from my point of view. I got a phone call, 2001. I was 17 at the time. I get a phone call from I guess you were, how old were you? I guess
I'm thinking I was 16.
16 maybe at that point?
Just turned 16.
Or maybe I was 18 by this point. But yeah, so
I think you were.
I was 18 at this point. I get a call. And it's like, hey, it's Kevin. I'm like, all right.
Yeah.
They're like, Mom told me to call you. I'm Sam, like, Mom, did someone kill you? Know, like, what are you talking about? So to explain this, at the Wild Samoan Training Center where I was training at the time, everybody called Afa Pops and called his wife Lynn Mom.
Yep.
And that is...
Still to this day.
Right, and that is who Kevin was referring to. Neither Afa nor Lynn had given me the heads up that someone was going to call. So our first interaction, I was so confused, had no idea. But really what happened was we lived about 10 minutes from each other, and you were about to start training at the Wild Samoan Training Center, and they had recommended that you reach out to me to carpool up there. And then we would drive up there, and I would put myself over by the entire time trying to seem like a big deal, talking about all the wrestlers I've met and interacted with, and anytime Bill Apter had introduced me to somebody, and you were very polite about it. And then you would kind of introduce me to, because I don't know if you were a tape trader or just tape collector, but
a little bit of both.
you knew a lot more independent wrestling that was going on, Japanese wrestling even, than I did. And so you would kind of introduce me to some of that.
It's a bit of a trade-off. I gave you a bit of an education, and you just name drop.
Yeah, absolutely. That was exactly what it was. That's still what I do. So then we were up there and we trained together at the Wild Samoan Training Center.
I remember my stepdad took me up there. We sat in, did the tryout, and Pops, oh, son, you're really good. And I was terrible.
Right.
But, we did the whole deal, and they had told me that somebody lived in my area that trains, and, I didn't drive yet. So maybe, here's his number, give him a call, and, you picked up the story right then and there, and that's pretty much how I remember it.
I was running my own wrestling promotion at a very young age, when it was the Teenage Wrestling Foundation. Later, it was just TWF. And at that point, from day one in February 2002, you came to help. We rented a ring from Afa, and you came to help us out as a runner in the back. Anything you could do, which really is... that's you in this business. That's how you were and how you are, just wanting to be involved in every aspect of it. And eventually that leads me to one of my favorite stories. Eventually you had your first match with us. Prior to that, because I guess you weren't 18 yet, so you couldn't wrestle.
Oh, that's right. We had to lie about my age.
Right. But prior to that, you were just like...
Do you remember in the locker room people having to hide me from the commission?
Yes.
Like you were doing a pre-show
I don't know if we
meeting.
put you in a locker or whatever we did, or down there, the showers in the back
We
area.
did a pre-show meeting, and I remember Kevin Matthews and Danny DeMonto sitting on either side of me, and Justin Cage in front of me, hiding me so that the commission wouldn't ask what your age was. Remotely even ask who you are.
They would go around, like I remember at one point I was 19 and we had a guy, Big Lou, who was 17. But I looked like I was 14, and Lou at 17 looked like he was 30, had this giant beard and everything. And they come by and they're checking my ID, and I'm like, first of all, I'm the promoter, so obviously. And then they didn't even check. So
I believe I even went to Franklin Mills Mall and had a fake ID made. They were actually making back in the day. They were giving you fake IDs. You could walk up to the check cashing place.
Now there's a statute of limitations, right? We're not getting
anybody in trouble here.
Okay.
But they were giving you whatever you put on the card. They picture, laminate the whole deal. So I was ready to rock and roll. They couldn't tell me.
There you go. No, you were good. So what happened was, prior to you making your in-ring debut, you wanted so badly to be a part of the show and to be in the ring, and you'd been training for a while at Afa's, and so we had this idea. We said, okay, we can do something. We're gonna have, as I mentioned, Big Lou. I'm gonna be in there cutting a promo. Big Lou's gonna be there, and you're gonna come up with a camera and start taking pictures. And Lou is going to get, ticked off that you're taking all these pictures, and he's going to bring you into the ring hard way. And for those who don't know, hard way would be hard way bump, not hard. You weren't, he wasn't going to bust you open hard way, but a hard way bump. You basically, you pull on the ropes, and the guy comes in from the apron, lands with his back on the mat.
I could do that at the time.
You couldn't.
Yes.
So you went over the top rope
and through the bottom,
under the middle. Over the bottom, your back hit the bottom, and then you went out of the ring on your head.
I was smart enough at that time to still sell it.
Yes, and then I believe you got up and he speared you outside.
Why did I get up?
Yeah, it would be so great if I were to have been able to dig up the footage of that.
I don't know how great that would have been.
Well, we're about to find out. If you can roll the footage right over there. There's slow motion right there. There it is. Yep.
Would you believe that kid went on to be on TV at some point?
I know, right? So let's get to that. So after that bump, you went on.
What year is that?
That was 2002.
Okay.
Yeah, that was summer of 2002. You had what a lot of people might not know, who are only familiar with you seeing you on TV as a referee. You were a full-fledged professional wrestler, and you traveled the world, really. You, at least outside of the country. Tell us a little bit about that transition into being a referee, how that came about.
So I'm wrestling. I'm doing the whole thing, and I know that I'm not going to make it as a wrestler. Yeah, it's not in the cards. I don't look like those guys. I didn't look like a wrestler. I didn't work out then. I clearly don't work out now. So I had no shot of making it to the WWE as a wrestler. Right. Not that the WWE was on my radar at the time. Mm-hmm. You got to remember, in 2005, there were only a select few people who were really getting name recognition, and those were the only people that were being paid attention to. Otherwise, this is still in the day of message boards and all the other stuff. If you weren't in the upper echelon, you were kind of looked at as a joke.
Right.
So a chance happened. This chance thing happened. I'm not sure if I've ever really told this story. I might have told it before on a podcast or something. I'm not really sure. But I had a very good family friend who worked for the WWE. Still works for the WWE. Mm-hmm. He's one of the directors of NXT currently. He's in a better position now than he was when, way back when he got my foot in the door. But I remember, guys like Nick Burke, and of course you remember Scott Fowler.
Scott Fowler, yeah.
Bill Bain, all of those guys were doing extra work in Baltimore, Maryland in July of 2005. I have nothing to do, So I called up my friends and I said, hey, I got a couple guys that are working some extra work tonight, some dark matches. I'd like to come. I didn't even care about the show. I'm going to come down and see those guys.
Yeah.
I was like, any chance I can get a couple tickets? He goes, couple tickets, that's all you want? I said, well, yeah, what else is there? He goes, well, Earl Hebner got fired today, and they're looking for a referee. I said, really? He said, how quickly can you get to Baltimore? I said, see you in 2 hours. So I'm fresh out of high school, maybe a year or so, no money, broke as can be. My grandma, I was living with my grandma at the time. She, before you go out to the deck, she had this little fish bowl there that was literally, that looked like a fish. So I took that whole thing with me, took it to ShopRite, threw it in Coinstar, drained the whole thing. I had $40. So off to Baltimore we go. Get down to Baltimore. I had the whole, I don't know if you probably remember, I had the whole long hair going. I think I'm a wrestler, it's cool. So we get down there and I get in there and, Marty brings me over to sits me in between Briscoe and Ted DiBiase. And they had to have been like, who is this kid and why is he here? Some of the answers that I gave them on different type of questions, they were really awesome, but they were clearly just doing it, to appease Marty.
Sure.
So Marty tells me, go over and sit in the stands. I'll come get you after rehearsal, the whole thing. Great, no problem. So I'm over there, I'm sitting in the stands, and lo and behold, here comes Vince McMahon. Not towards me. He's not coming to talk to me, but here he comes. Now I'm starting to panic because I want to know. I'm
about to get thrown out,
if I'm
maybe,
Vince
or
McMahon,
what?
I want to know why this kid is sitting in my stands. But he's on the phone. So in all the arenas they have the hockey wall.
Yeah.
So he's leaning up against that. I'm 3 rows behind him, and I'm just Vince McMahon standing 15 feet in front of me. This is wild. So at that time, John Laurinaitis was the head of talent relations.
Right.
So I'm sitting. So Vince walks away. I see this, and I didn't know who John was at the time. We talked about some Japanese wrestling. I knew Hayabusa. I knew this guy. I knew that guy. Johnny Ace was never really anybody that came across my tape. I didn't think to Google him because I didn't know what to expect walking in here, right? So here comes this guy all dressed in black. Now, mind you, three or four security guards already asked me who I am. Right. I'm with Marty. Oh, okay, cool. I'm with this one. All right, cool. No. So this day, John just happened to be dressed in black. And I'm like, great. Here comes another security guard. 5th time's the charm. I'm getting tossed. He's got blonde hair. He's walking towards me, and he goes, Kevin? And yes, sir. I hear you're a friend, John Laurinaitis. I'm like, whoa. This is the dude that...
Because you know the name. That's the thing, right? You know the name,
exactly
but you don't
who he
know.
Was.
Right.
This is the dude that gives out contracts. What's happening here? So he sits down. He goes, So tell me a little bit about yourself. So I go through the whole thing, this, that, and the third. And I don't even really know if he knew why he was talking to me, because he starts saying, I hear you're a wrestler. Well, yes, sir. Tell me what you do. Goes through, go through the whole thing, and he goes, here's my personal number. Get a little bit of a tan, get in a little bit better shape, and I'll send you to Deep South for a tryout. I'm like, well, shit, if nothing else, I got a tryout. We're good to go here.
Yeah, right.
He gets up to walk away. He turns back around. He goes, you ever referee before? Yes, sir. Not really.
Right.
He goes, you any good? I'm my own worst critic, John. Great, you're in the dark match tonight. Corderas calls Jimmy Corderas. Get this kid's hair cut, get him wired up, the whole deal, put him in the dark match. Wow, okay, so here we go.
Oh, they didn't even ask you, would you mind cutting your hair? It's just, we're going to cut your hair.
They did. And,
did they really? Okay.
Well, sort of. So John says to me, get his hair cut, whatever. He might have asked me, you don't mind, right? And I'll never forget this, and I don't know why I said it, and I would never say it today. And I was like 18 or 19 years old. It just, the balls on me back then. I was like, well, how short? He's like, for an opportunity, right? I'm like, right. He's like, so here we go, cut the hair, boom, wired me up, SmackDown shirt, the whole thing. Next thing I know, I'm in the locker room with Lance Cade and Trevor Murdoch and Nunzio and Vito.
Okay.
Vito's just came in. No, I'm sorry. Murdoch just came in. The Cowboys haven't started on TV yet.
Right.
So we did the dark match, and God, it's so bad. On my end, not their end.
When you say it was horrible,
By today's standards.
right? But from your end, I'm saying refereeing is something that it's almost like this day and age when every fan either knows or more likely thinks they know what it is to put on a wrestling match from a wrestling standpoint. They know about spots, calling this and calling that or whatever. I feel like being a referee is something that is still pretty, I don't know if it's so much that it's protected or just that people just don't really get what the referee's doing a lot. Did anyone kind of I mean, obviously you've been working for a while, but there's a difference between working between a referee for an indie show, even the biggest indie show, and a referee for a television taping. So did anyone smarten you up? Hey, here's some of the cues you're going to hear. Here's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, to an extent. Like at this time, SmackDown was still.
It was taped, right?
Still the brand split, and it was taped and all that type of stuff. So Jimmy Corderas was there, and he was great. He was my go-to right from the beginning. Brian Hebner was awesome. Brian was kind of like, I'm sure we'll get into it in a little bit, but like my first road trip not too long after this tryout, which was there was like an extended tryout. Brian was like my chaperone. The office told him like, hey, kind of keep an eye on him type deal. But yeah, I always had those guys to fall back on.
So you came back, they said you did a good job?
So John was like, great job. And I was like, really? Like, I know nothing to compare it to. But before I left Philadelphia, I scoped out where they were for like the next 6 weeks.
Sure.
And they were all drives. Nothing that the company would ever have to fly me for, or not that they would at that time, but it's just like, how many shows can I make? How can I stretch this out and make sure these people know who I am? They were all drives like the next 6 weeks. So John said, hey, write down your information. I said, well, can I come next week? Like, I didn't want it to end.
Right.
He's like, where are we? I said, Cleveland and Rochester. He's like, yeah, sure. Come, I'll put you in the dark match and pay you $250. I'm like, great. So I get to Rochester.
Get to pay your grandmother back very quickly.
Yeah, no kidding. So we get to Rochester, and this is around the time they're starting the ECW thing. One Night Stand had just happened, and now they're still doing the crossover, kind of. So I get to Rochester, and Johnny asked me, again, dark matches both nights. The Cleveland dark match actually was Matt Cappotelli and The Miz. They were trying these guys out to bring them up to the main roster versus the Highlanders. This was the Highlanders tryout, whether they were going to hire them or not. Clearly, they hired them. So we get to Rochester, same dark match, same thing. And Johnny asked me if I have a passport. And I'm like, passport? Wow, like, what's going on here? I'm like, they sending me to Europe? Like, so like, there was Canadian house shows coming up in a month. So John says to me, I want you at all the TVs leading up to that Canadian road trip, and we'll talk after that. So it was like, I started in Baltimore. It was like Cleveland, Rochester, I think Mohican Sun and Bridgeport, and then like 2 other ones, and then that loop of house shows.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never forget, this is how long ago it was, I'm sitting in the library with Ricky Reyes because we had to still
Once upon a time, we had these things called libraries.
No
kids.
kidding.
Yeah.
But you had to go there to get on the internet. Like you couldn't,
Yeah.
There was no iPhones or anything, right?
Yep.
So I'll never forget, the phone rings, and this is the night before I'm leaving. And Howard Finkel is on the other end. And I remember him giving me my travel as if he was calling a match. Like, you can ask Luke Gallows this, like it happened to him too.
Well, he does a fantastic impersonation of Howard Finkel.
Yeah, he does. But I remember this happening to him as well, because I'll never, Kevin, how you doing? This is Howard Finkel. And I'm like, oh my God. Are you ready to go to Cleveland or whatever? And I'm like, does he do this with everybody? Because I remember just telling Gallows, I'm like, that happened with me too. He's like, wasn't it awesome? Like, yeah. So anyway, so I called John and, hey, do you need me at Penn State this week? Because they were at Penn State. And I remember he didn't give me a deadline or a cutoff and say, this is where, he just said, we'll talk after the Canadian loop.
Sure.
So I called, he's like, no, we're good for now. We're going to bring up the referee from Ohio Valley Wrestling. And he's like, but definitely stay in touch with me. We want to do work in the future. Mm-hmm. And so that's where it ended for that extended tryout. I went back to wrestling, and then they brought ECW back as a brand.
After you were hired, did you go right to OVW or you went? Or
No,
did you
I
go
was,
to Deep
I was
South?
I was on the main roster first.
Main roster first.
came
Isn't
right-
that amazing? Like, main roster, then we'll send you to developmental, right?
They want to send me to Deep South. And again, the balls of me back then, I asked John, can I go to OVW? You don't want to go Deep South? I said, I'd rather go to OVW if possible. All right, see you in Kentucky. Like, it was just that simple.
Wow.
And it was the best move I ever made.
So OVW, that is where you and I reconnect again. Tell me a little bit, before we get back to our relationship, what was it like for you in OVW when you got there and working with, now that you'd been up on the main roster, you're coming down to people who, a lot of them, their goal is to one day hopefully get even a tryout on the main roster at a tryout, at a house show. And you're coming down there. What was that relationship like with people down there?
Oh, it was fine. Everyone was really welcoming. I just went over this with Cody Rhodes last week. The first person that I met when I walked in the door was Cody Rhodes.
Yeah.
And he said it, and you can go back and listen to it on the Smarks and Sharps podcast. I told him I remember walking in the door. He was the first person I met. But that was our college.
Yeah, it really was. It really was.
I didn't go to college. That was my college. Everyone was awesome right from Jump Street.
So tell us a little bit about that call to go to Tampa.
Tampa was actually my call.
Really?
Yeah, it was my call. I don't know why I did it. I wasn't tired of Louisville by any means, and I always said that had I been brought back up to the main roster, I would have stayed in Louisville. Mm-hmm. I don't remember exactly what prompted me to ask to go to Florida, but I remember emailing the office asking, can I know it's brand new down there. You guys are setting up and the whole thing. Your feet are somewhat on the ground. Can I go? And I remember they were like, yeah. I mean, is that what you want to do? I was like, yeah.
Did you see the writing on the wall? Because a week before I got to OVW,
was that the Hunter
Triple
and Shawn
H
visit?
and Shawn Michaels came
Okay.
down. So a funny thing, I was at the Arnold Classic in March. It was right before WWE left. And I am in the back, going by the back door, and who walks in by himself? Triple H. And I go over, introduce myself, and he was way more polite, gave me more time than he probably should have. But
he's pretty awesome.
And I'm saying to him, I'm like, yeah, I'm down there. At this point, I'm all, I'm Mr. Wrestling. I'm wearing my Affliction shirt. I'm, putting my best foot forward. 2008 pro wrestler. And I'm like, yeah, I'm down in OVW. I'm training. I'm wrestling down there. He's like, oh, it's the place to be. And you talk about like being ballsy. I was like, well, it was. And he's like, yeah, I guess so. And that was it. I was like, well, good to talk to you, whatever. Because they had just announced, I think that weekend was their last show in Kentucky.
I was very job scared back then, so it's like that might be the case. Very easily could be the case, but I'm not totally sure. But I do remember they were very responsive. They're like, yeah, if you want to go, like that's fine. And I'm like, cool. So I mean, I'm moving to Florida, which was great.
What led to your release from WWE?
Nothing crazy. It's not a crazy story or anything. If you remember back in 2009, the housing market just went right through the ground, and the economy just hit rock bottom, and we were in a recession and anything like that. And remember, all companies were cutting at that time.
Absolutely.
And I remember seeing, I don't know if it was CNN, Fox News, or something like that, and I want to say Linda McMahon was on the show, and they said, the WWE's looking to cut $100 million company-wide. And I'm just like, well, we all know what that means, right?
You're released by the WWE. What is your first mindset? Are you thinking, maybe I'll get back into wrestling? Hey, now I'm a WWE ref. Maybe I'll get bookings reffing.
My actual first thought was, and this was so stupid. My first thought was, I'm gonna go back to wrestling. I'm gonna get out. I was in the WWE. I'm gonna get a ton of bookings. You kidding me? And then that idea just flew by the wayside.
We're jumping way ahead here, but you made a return to television.
Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier Matt Hardy, and then we'd talk about your relationship with the Hardys. Final Deletion for Impact Wrestling. That was, anyone who follows that, they're familiar with the broken Matt Hardy gimmick and all of that. And he had that whole thing at the Hardy compound. And I remember you and I, we've stayed in touch over the years and stuff, but I didn't know you were doing that.
Nobody did. And
I'm sitting there watching, and a car pulls up, and there's Kevin Keenan. And I'm like, oh my God. I was like blown away. I'm like, wait a minute, what is happening here?
It's so funny. I remember, I believe TNA released some of these on YouTube or whatever. Maybe it was just something internal, so sorry if I'm getting anybody in trouble. But I forget if it was Jeremy Borash who sent it to me, or if it was like Robbie E. or somebody sent it. Somebody sent me. They were doing.
Well, neither of them are there anymore anyway.
But
so
they were doing reaction shots to like the Final Deletion of So like they did one with EC3, and they did one with Spud, and they did one with Magnus. And the biggest pop of the whole thing was me getting out of the car. Like EC3 like threw his popcorn up, like Spud like jumped up and down. Like people were just like, the boys were entertained by it, which is if the boys are entertained by it just solely by me rolling up in a car, then they're really in for a wild ride.
Can you tell us a little bit about how that came to be?
Final Deletion was the beginning. I was just thinking about this the other day because I figured this would come up, and how this all started. So I remember Matt coming in town for an appearance with Delaware Blue Rocks.
Okay. And
he was doing a signing, and I hit him up. Hey, man, you want to grab dinner? Yeah, cool. Come down to the game. We'll grab dinner. The whole deal. So I go down to see him. Line wrapped around the stadium. He's doing the deal. Finally, we're done. We go to eat, and his phone rings when we're pulling out of the driveway, out of the parking lot. And it's Jeff, and they're talking about this thing, and I'm hearing Matt talk about fire and the big cross, and we're going to do this, and I'm going to ride on a four-wheeler and shoot you with fireworks. And I'm just thinking, dude, these guys live in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, right?
Like, what are they doing? Just like, are they entertaining themselves? Like, what's the deal here? So he's telling me, so he gets off the phone, and he's like, I got to tell you about this deal, but got to keep it, on the DL. And he's laying out the Final Deletion for me, and that's everything I heard, the whole thing. But it was his wife's idea. It was Rebby's idea to put me in to the Final Deletion.
Okay.
So Matt calls me up. Hey, man, you want to do this deal? Like, remember that deal I was telling you about a couple weeks ago? Yeah. You want to come down and do it? I'm like, absolutely. Now, none of us knew going in what this actually was going to end up being.
Right.
Like, we had no idea.
It was huge.
I remember rolling up, and there's this ring in the middle of the woods on Jeff's property, and it took a while to shoot. I remember I had a show in Maryland the night before, shot right down to North Carolina, and I got there as they were shooting the very first scene, the Maxwell's birthday party and the xylophone and all that stuff. So it was cool to watch. And then I got changed, and we started doing the whole thing. Obviously, I had to wait for it to get dark. The car scene, and I just improv. What is this? They didn't tell me to say anything. I didn't ask to say anything. Just happened to work. It fit great.
Do it, man.
And then, here we are. Are you a licensed official? I am.
And you became the licensed official. That was like, people knew who you were from that.
For a better part of a year after that, like, I was Matt's personal Bill Alfonso.
Yeah.
Like, wherever Matt ended up, for the most part, like, no one was flying me anywhere to do anything, but like, if I could do a show that he was on, he'd rather have had me there than not, and that happened a lot. That happened with Tommy Dreamer's House of Hardcore, MCW. Like, we were kind of all over the place doing, and it was getting to the point where, like, if I was doing a run-in on a Matt match, fans knew. These were fans that watched the Final Deletion, so like, they knew that I was coming to get involved on behalf of Matt. It was pretty cool for a pretty good.
When did you say, you know what, like, this has been fun, I have to come back to the real world?
Yeah.
What?
We're going on a better part of 3 years now.
Okay.
It got to a point where I was doing WrestlePro for Pat Buck, and that was kind of like my home federation, my home company. I mean, I was hustling. Like, I was working every weekend. I would be pissed if I wasn't doing 75 shows a year. So like, man, we were moving. There was a time where I was working with the Young Bucks every weekend. There was times where I was working with the Wolves every weekend. Like, we were really catching some miles and doing some shows. It came around the time where the indies weren't doing anything for me anymore. If you remember, up until recently, earlier this year, there was still only the WWE.
Yeah.
Now there's 7 different places to work for a variety of reasons, and that's awesome. But the WWE wasn't banging on my door, and I wasn't banging on theirs. So really, what am I getting out of this? Running around doing the indies every weekend, it just really wasn't doing it for me. And at this time, coincidentally, I came in to start doing sports talk radio producing for the largest radio station here in Philadelphia, Sports Radio 94 WIP. So there was more of a, what's the word I'm looking for, a concentration on that, as opposed to running out and doing indies every weekend. I really needed to nail this down.
Right, that wasn't something that you could be doing as like a hobby.
No, this was the next step after wrestling. And if this over here came around again, sure, that'd be cool.
Fill everybody in on what you're up to now, what your involvement is in professional wrestling today, if any, and other than the podcast. And
my involvement in professional wrestling today is very limited. I still keep my finger on the pulse. Still keep an eye on what people are doing. I watch some of the shows if I can. Social media obviously is a great tool to keep up with what's going on in the business. You learn very quickly what people like and what people don't like just simply by looking at Twitter.
Yeah.
But my involvement's very limited. Right now, I am a sports talk radio producer for WIP. As you said, we do the Smarks and Strips podcast. It's pretty cool. The dynamic of the Smarks and Strips podcast is I'm obviously the Stripes versus the Smarks. I have 2 co-hosts. They're wrestling fans. I'm the industry insider. And we meet in the middle. Believe the fans think they know better than the people in the business.
I can't. That doesn't seem right to me, Kevin.
It's crazy. It's insane. And, most times on the podcast, they learn pretty quickly. They don't know better than me. But we have a lot of fun. We have a lot of guests. Like I said earlier, we had Cody and Brandy on the podcast last week. We have Ken Anderson coming up this week. It's on iTunes, radio.com, all the major platforms. We've had Tom Phillips on. We've had Baron Corbin, Bailey Mark Henry. So go back and listen to some of them. We have a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah, definitely make sure that you listen to the podcast. It is entertaining. The future. What would it take for you to put the stripes back on? Obviously, we've got AEW now. There are so many NWA. There MLW just getting ready to have their first pay-per-view. There's so much going on. And then, of course, there is the WWE that has Raw, that has SmackDown, that has NXT now on USA. There's a lot out there. You are somebody with vast knowledge in that department. Obviously, any of those companies could utilize somebody with your skill and with your knowledge. So have you thought about that? Are you waiting to hear from someone? Are you thinking, hey, maybe I'll reach out? Is it just kind of a timing right thing?
Yeah, I think the time would have to be right. Look, man, there's a lot going on right now, and it's a really cool time. I wasn't in the business during the Attitude Era. Obviously, I was a kid during the Attitude Era. I was a fan during the Attitude Era. I think we're on the cusp, if we're not already in one. I think we're on the cusp of a boom in the business, and sitting on the sidelines for a boom in the business that I gave so much of my life for, and so much of my adult life for. Sitting on the sidelines isn't exactly a lot of fun. But I don't know. I think it would have to work out. It would have to be right for everybody, whether that is NWA, whether that is AEW, whether it's MLW, Impact, whatever it is. It has to make sense for both sides. I'm not completely against it. It's certainly something that I would explore and have conversations with, and with whoever, and all that fun stuff. Not necessarily looking to do a full-time road schedule. And let's be honest, there's only one company that does a full-time road schedule right now. And like we said earlier, they're not banging my door down. I'm certainly not, banging on theirs. Not to say I wouldn't do it. It's just something that I'm not necessarily interested in. But the future is it's the cool thing about the future, man. You never know. You never know what's going to happen. It's,
and I mean the same
there's
can
a
be
lot
said for the
going on.
wrestling business in general. And would you ever? So like for me, we talked about when I wanted to be a wrestler, just like you. We just wanted to be wrestlers, and it took me a good decade to wrap my head around the fact that maybe I could be a part of this business again, not as a wrestler. And now, I have the show on Fight and everything I've been able to do with AEW and Fight, and other companies as well. I love what I'm doing, and it's something that I never thought I'd be able to do. Are you open? Obviously, your regular job, you're not refereeing.
Right.
You have another set of skills outside of that. Have you ever entertained the idea of maybe getting back into the business, doing something else?
Sure. I think I have a lot to offer in that area. Obviously I did TV for wrestling, and know how to work in IFB, and be produced through all that stuff, and now I have the radio experience and all that stuff. Yeah, I'm definitely open to that. But we'll see. I'm ridiculously, how do I say this? Ridiculously organized, and kind of have a little bit of ADD and stuff like that. So I'm very good with paperwork and staying busy, and just an office type person. So behind the scenes jobs and stuff like that, I'd be able to do that. I'd be happy doing that. I still have a mind for wrestling. Still have a mind for the business. I don't think any company would ever hire me as a producer, but I would certainly be able to contribute in that way. There's the cool thing about me, and I'm saying this about me, the cool thing about me, but the cool thing about me is I'm multifaceted. I'm not just wrestling tunnel vision. I have certain other things that can contribute to whatever show.
To an overall production.
To an overall product.
Right. Is there one thing in your experience that you had to date in professional wrestling that stands out to you as maybe your favorite moment, your favorite thing that you got to be a part of? Anything that stands out to you? Yeah,
it's easy to answer. The final deletion was probably the career highlight. Close second was the first time I did Monday Night Raw in Philadelphia, obviously. Center ice of the Flyers, worldwide television, family there, the whole deal. And weirdly, the third one, and I shouldn't say this weirdly because I did it quite often, but anytime I got to work with Cena, anytime you worked with John, it was just a different feeling. It felt like you were even though you were in the ring, he was the star, but it felt like you were the star too. He was just working with him.
Everything happening under those lights was
completely different level anytime you worked with Cena. So I'd probably say those three were certainly things that I look back on.
All right. Well, I look forward to when and if you have any more of those things, then you'll have to come back and
you never know.
And talk to us
But
again.
We'll chat again.
Awesome.
You got it.
Thanks for being here, Kevin.
Yeah, appreciate it.
All right, Kevin Keenan, everybody.
You believe you see all there is to see in the world. You believe there's nothing hiding in the shadows. But I have seen the truth. And it's more wonderful and more terrifying than you could ever imagine.
That's our show. Join us again next month for my 1-year anniversary show.
Yeah!
Can you believe I made it a year? My guest will be my great friend, the legendary Bill Apter. Until then, be sure to check out some more great videos on youtube.com/So Says Shernoff. Follow me on Twitter and Facebook at So Says Shernoff and at Shernoff Show. This has been So Says Shernoff because that is what Shernoff had to say. Good night, everybody.